Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Sony RX100 Mark VII on the left, the latest and greatest, just dropped, and its predecessor, the RX100 Mark VI. Now, if you're trying to figure out which one of these pocket point-and-shoot little miracle cameras is right for you, it's pretty straightforward. And that's because in terms of pricing, well, they're only 100 US apart. Right now, 1100 for the Mark VI, which was originally 1200, and of course now 1200 retail for the Mark VII. So if anyone is brand new to the market and trying to figure out which one is right, I'm instantly going to tell them, get the Mark VII. For a $100 price difference, there's no reason to look back at the Mark VI. On the other hand, I do know, I've covered every single RX100 to date, forget God knows how many Sony cameras over the years, and other electronics of just about every variety. The Mark VI is going to go on sale. There are going to be deals. And if that gap widens enough that this is 300 less, 400 less, I'm going to point just about every consumer at the Mark VI. And that's very simple as to why. And I'll make that clear in this video, as concise as possible. So, first and foremost, these cameras are nearly identical. Same lens, improved sensor in the Mark VII. The real key advantage that the Mark VII has over the Mark VI lies in that it has a microphone jack, something that you simply are not going to get on the Mark VI. You can see it right there. So if you want a microphone jack, the Mark VII is the only way to go. But that's not the most important feature here. For some of you, it will be. The most important feature really lies in the autofocus capability of the Mark VII. It's a completely new system in terms of 357 phase detection points, real-time tracking in video. So you're not just getting the benefit of having a revamped autofocus system in the still world, but we finally have it in video as well. And to complement that video, you now also have the ability to take off the threshold for overheating. So even though we're limited to 5-minute caps, we can put that threshold at a higher level, something we can't do with the Mark VI. And so not only do we have better autofocus, but the ability to use that autofocus for a longer period of time. Eye autofocus here works for both human and animals. I think that we're all animals, but you know what I'm saying. Pets, really, cats and dogs. Limitations beyond that. And I'm not going wild on that, haven't taken this thing on a safari, it just arrived. But beyond that, the other thing that is noteworthy between the two, and this is pretty much where it ends, is that the Mark VII has the ability to employ active steady shot in 4K video. This is the first camera Sony has ever done that with. It's not surprising. It'll probably now make its way into every single camera. I don't care if we're talking about full frame, pro grade, interchangeable lens, the A9 successor, the A7R Mark IV that's coming out. I haven't heard anything, but I wouldn't be shocked if active steady shot makes its way through a firmware update. And what that means is that at the expense of cropping some of your image while shooting video, it will stabilize it. And this is something that has existed in action cams for years. Now we have it as an option in an RX100. And it should have been here a long time ago. So I both applaud Sony for bringing it, but I also am kind of like, why wasn't it here already? So those are really the key differences. Again, autofocus prowess goes to the Mark VII, microphone jack goes to the Mark VII, the video threshold goes to the Mark VII, and of course, the other thing that I just mentioned is that active steady shot, but that's all part of the video capability. Now, in terms of core functionality, the Mark VI is still going to produce nearly identical results. It simply does not have the things I just mentioned. They're just not there. There's no Type-C charging, quick charging, same style battery, same screen. The Mark VI did have some issues with the diopter control, actually moving, but Sony's corrected that, at least as far as I'm aware. So overall, I've mentioned all of the real differences between the Mark VI and the Mark VII, and there's really no reason, if you own a Mark VI, to jump to the Mark VII unless those features that I just went over are compelling enough to make you want this new camera. Now, again, if you're starting fresh and there's a $100 difference, there's no reason to consider the Mark VI. There really isn't. Even saving that $100, the features I've mentioned here make this a better camera in every way. But as I said at the top of the video, if we get to a $300 to $400 difference, I can't make that argument, especially since all of you are going to use this camera as I run out of oxygen in a different capacity. Maybe you don't care about video. If you don't care about video, then half of what I discussed, including that microphone input, they're just irrelevant factors to you. Now, on the other hand, if you do care about video, which I do think the RX100 is all about being that hybrid, then this is the clear winner. And even though it has superior autofocus, and I really mean that, I can't stress it enough, is it enough that the RX100 Mark VI is not still arguably one of the best pocket cameras ever made? Absolutely not. So if that's the measure of things, and I always think it really comes down to budget and what you plan on doing with the camera, I think both of these are fantastic choices, but the Mark VII clearly the winner. But when it comes to pricing, as this Mark VI becomes less expensive, it's going to be harder and harder for consumers to justify making the leap to the Mark VII pricing. Now, if prices stay exactly the same, which I really doubt they will, because with a $100 price gap, again, there's no comparison. You just take it. You know, you're spending $1,100. Why are you not spending $1,200? I mean, you got to be a little bit stupid. There's got to be something off with you. Something's got to be wrong. But when that gap widens, but Sony's really rigid on trying to keep the structure on retail pricing with the RX100 lineup. That's why the Mark I is still made today. I got to wonder what something's going to have to give. So I expect come Black Friday, you know, holiday season, the Mark VI is going to be the one to pick up. And the Mark VII is going to stay exactly where it is. And part of why I come to that conclusion is I've also seen that the Mark VII is pretty much sold out. That doesn't mean it's not still available in some outlets. B&H still has it in stock, Adorama still has it, but Best Buy sold out, never even carried it in store. This could be indicative of other things. In terms of other retailers, it's just not saturated the way the Mark VI launch was. So that means there are a lot more RX100 Mark VI still out there than I think Sony has slated to produce with the 7. I think that's about where we are economically, not just in this country, in the United States, but globally. I think it has to do with where the economy is going and Sony hedging their bets on being more conservative. It's not a measure of whether or not the Mark VII or Mark VI are good or solid products or will sell well. It's just a little bit more bearish approach to the market. So that pretty much covers, in my opinion, again, a short and introductory comparison of the two because they are so similar. But the things I mentioned are what really make them different. And don't get me wrong, there are other features, you know, time-lapse was reintroduced into this camera since we no longer have play memory since Mark V. So if you want to do time-lapse, it's here, it's built in, it's not here in the Mark VI. But I don't think that's the thing that's going to be the difference between someone purchasing the 6 or the 7. It's really about the things I've mentioned already, the microphone jack, the video stabilization, the autofocus system. And Sony has claimed slightly better battery life. I haven't seen that yet. And of course, also being able to, at your own risk, lift the overheating limitations of the camera when shooting video. Pretty much covers it. I mean, RX100 Mark VII, best RX100 to date. RX100 Mark VI, well, that was the best until this thing dropped. So it's all about pricing and whether or not you need those extra features I just mentioned. Hope that helps. Any questions or comments? Please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.